everyone, I'm on a Magick. Tonight I have Troll Towelhead on, and he's going to talk about quite a bit. I love to introduce to him, everyone, you to him, and without further ado, let's just go ahead with the show. Hello, Troll, how are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm doing well. Greetings.
You know what? I find you quite fascinating because you have a ton of information. I've looked at your videos, I have read your literature, I have visited your website, and you offer so much. Can you give the audience a little bit, much of an intro, something about you? Because I don't know where to begin, actually.
Sure. I was inspired by the satanic panic of the late 1990s to begin a pact with Satan, as I understand Satan. And at that time, I signed a blood pact in order to assist and defend Satan against our adversaries. And since that time, I have written a gospel of Satan, which is a scripture, and I have assisted and informed the world about what Satan and Satanism is in its reality rather than the propaganda that is used to promote anger and fury at the enemies of those who do the promoting. And since that time, in 1996, today is my anniversary of my pact. I have been engaged in that activity and used the World Wide Web and many different kinds of connections to promote that information and to make it known to the public.
I see. Now, prior to this, were you a Satanist then, or is it
No,
something? No, all right.
no, I converted to Satanism at that time, at the time of my pact.
I see. And what actually persuaded you to, or what was there any other, path that led you to Satanism?
Well, I'd say that the primary context for my compassionate act of pacting was that I was engaged with witches and neo-pagans, and I've
Mm.
been a very good friend of many religious peoples, and I have had many lovers and many very good friends in the neo-pagan and witchcraft community or subculture. When I saw this developing in the 1990s, I was very alarmed and it struck my heart. And so I decided that I would try to see it through to the truth. And that's the primary basis for my action.
I see. Okay. Now, since you've actually, I would say, um, crossed the pathway, in which you're taking at this moment, and which I pretty much foresee that you will for quite a long time. How has your life changed?
I'd say that it has become more diverse. The poles of controversy in the realm that I walk, whether that's in the occult world, which I'm very familiar with and have studied for a long time and know many people, or in those of religions, has taken a turn for the more diverse because of my embracing of the wrathful. That is, that which appears to be demonic, what appears to be dangerous. I am merely attempting to find a bridge to that in a very clear and coherent, safe way and make it clear to others how that can be done.
I see. Okay. You have a book called The Gospel of Satan, and I've read it, and I find it quite interesting because it references lots of areas where the information is rather how should I put it, stamped on as gospel, if you will, and hence the name of the book.
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to understand exactly your source and how you've come about lots of information in there, because within here you speak of within the book, which by the way is a very interesting and good book, that you've mentioned, how to make a pact, how to really start off in Satanism, to various notations about your reference as to what Satanism is, and really how things began. Where is your reference, and how you actually put everything together? The reason why I ask you is, as I would ask any person of any type of religious or pathway doctrine. Where is your reference from? Because of course I haven't been where you are. I certainly wasn't, at a place where many people who've written Bibles and Qurans and the Torah and so have you. So where have you been, and where is the source of your information?
Well, the first part of it would be a result of my study of books, and that included demonology and the study of personifications of evil through time in academic sources, and also sociology of religion, of the things that developed during the 1900s, religious witchcraft and religious Satanism as they manifested during that time period. And secondarily, it came from interviews with many different Satanists, pagans of different kinds, and witches, and different people either online or in person who affiliated with these social groups. Thirdly, it has been a result of my involvement with Satan as I understand Satan, and that has been varied in the relationship. Initially, it was an understanding that Satan was a set of natural phenomena that people were afraid of, and so labeled in a very demonic way. Later, it became part of the story, the gospel that I wrote, as I was inspired to write as a result of reading Milton's Paradise Lost. I understood from reading that and studying it that it became the basis for how many people see the universe today, rather than really a very scrutinizing study of the scriptures as they actually stand. So, in part, I wrote that as a hatred of the fact that this was being misunderstood and presented in that fashion. Later, approximately a year ago, maybe a year and a few months, I was contacted in my dreams by Satan, as I understand, that being him, and he informed me that he wanted to have an ongoing relationship. And so I developed that as a third aspect to both the relationship that I have as well as the source for information that I put into the Gospel of Satan. It's a combination of the scripture and my commentary on the scripture, and then a number of different essays that I call fatwas, because they're religious opinions about the
Yes.
idea of Satanism.
I see. Now, I've noticed you reference, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, some Islamic type of demeanor about your persona as well as the wording. Can you clarify the association?
I'd be happy to. I've been friends with many different types of religious primarily in the South San Francisco Bay Area, where I was born and where I've grown up and spent most of my time. In that time period, I was fortunate enough to meet a number of different Muslims and Sufis, particularly, whom I enjoyed greatly. I studied what they were teaching. I sat with some of their sheikhs, and I sat with them in what they called the remembrance ritual or something to that effect. And I noticed during the course, after just about the end of this last century, that there was, in relation to warfare that had been a result of incidents in the World Trade Center incident and other things of that sort, there was a demonizing of Muslims. And I saw this as directly related to the demonizing of alternative religious or pagans or whatnot. And I sought to align with or associate myself with them by name, by manner, by a character of a kind, and really in solidarity, but also as a means of martyrdom. I find it to be important to engage the demonizing of people directly to become its target, and then embrace it as a kind of a Christian dynamic of seeing to it with love if I'm able, and transitioning or transmuting that into something more positive.
I see. Okay. Now, how do the Sufis actually revere and feel about what you do in relationship to Satanism?
Well, I couldn't speak for all Sufis, but the ones that I met in the San Francisco Bay Area were very welcoming. I told them I was a Satanist, and I told them what I was about. They informed me about various stories of Iblis and of that being the first lover of Allah, and many things that were very positive in relation to the shaitan of Sufism or of Islam. And they were friendly, they were welcoming, and they were just giving me the character of uh, acceptance and love. I only have positive things to say about the Sufis I met.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Now let's go back to Satanism and particularly your gospel. Now, when you talk about what, Satan came to you and wanted to be a part of your life, I would assume that when you actually made your pact originally, that Satan was a part of your life at that point. Or was that something that you basically felt symbolically happened and really the relationship only began just 1 year ago?
Hmm. I don't know. It would be difficult for me to decide between those two options. I would say that my relationship with Satan began with my study of Satanology, and that was previous to my pact. And otherwise, I would say that the arrangement was not personal, that it was an impersonal relationship at the time of the pact, because I understood Satan to be related to things interior to me and exterior to me that are uncontrolled and that I wish to somehow change and I negotiate or have a relationship to. And I did not understand Satan the same way when he came to me in dreams. And then it became a personal relationship.
I see.
So I'd say
So,
it extended through
yeah,
all
sure.
of that time.
Now, would you say that it was more of a possession or an invocation that you actually have imposed upon yourself, or you have
Oh.
actually have a relationship with Satan? Which one would you say it would be?
I would definitely say that the initiation of my relationship with Satan was invocation, and it was very specifically ritual invocation. Previous to my pact, I was intentionally invoking Satan by a variety of means in order to come to an understanding or communion with that energy, entity, or intelligence.
I see. Okay, so with the empowerment, and conjoined relationship with Satan as an invocated essence, um, have you been able to function, let's say, in a human way? Because I would take the essence and the power of Satan to be rather powerful. Would it be only within the regards to the information that through the invocation you have been able to write your gospel and then reflect upon your fatwas and put that in context? Or is this something that you feel, or the relationship and invocation or the possession within is something that goes on all the time?
Hmm. I don't connect it directly. It seems to me that the primary incentive for writing the gospel was one of distinct anger and an understanding of what was going on in the
I see.
culture I'm living in. And I think that I did associate Satan with anger and with things that were uncontrolled, but that the writing of the gospel itself was something that I did, and egotism is something I associate as well with Satanism and the things that I'm doing.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk about the gospel, because when people hear the word gospel, they hear the word. It's like the word. It's the word. It's, there is no other. This is, the reinterpretation. This is what someone is saying, and you, of course, given your opinion. Now, when you're doing this, many people are going to assume right off the bat, right off when reading your book, that this is the word through Satan. This is something that coming through, as in with, if they were to read a Bible or something, the Gospel of whoever, one of the guys, John or something. So this is the word of that person. So you're saying the Gospel of Satan. So these are the words, and this is the information, and your fatwas is your opinion of the Gospel based on the interpretation of your invocation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fairly close. I would say that the explanation of it was my own, and it's informed by my relationship as it was to Satan at the time. The um, the gospel itself is a story about Jesus. And in that story, the character is Yeshua, which is another name for Jesus. And so this is a Jesus story, and one that I'm familiar with in terms of the characters, and some of whom appear in other Gospels. I'm a fan of Gospels. I like Jesus characters. I don't think of them as historical. I think of them as oral tales, which are very inspirational. And I like the aspects of Jesus that are peacemaking and love thy neighbor focused.
I see. Okay. Um, you speak about anger, and I would like, because I feel that, you have taken the time to write this book, and just like any euphoric feeling, any feeling of sadness, happiness, or love, it's usually a very personal thing. So your anger is a personal thing. However, I have to say that I think everyone shares your anger in reference to a lot of the slander and a lot of the slightness of people speaking against Satanism. So with that, if you can possibly clarify a few titles and words for the audience, and I feel that this will actually help roll out a lot of ignorance. Um, you've got Lucifer, the light bearer. You've got Satan. You've got the devil. You've got demon. Could you please really differentiate within your interpretation of all of those personas?
Sure. I think that, let me start at the beginning. Lucifer, as I understand it, is a reference, an ancient reference, astronomical to the planet Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And it was provided a complete story backdrop as part of a Jewish set of tales of Enoch, attributed to
Mm-hmm.
Enoch and Noah primarily, and these were given the idea of an entire cosmology of fallenness and fallen angels. This was the construction of Christians, as I understand it, and they associated this with the fall of Adam and Eve and the story of Eden. And all of this was connected with their Bible, and this figure of Lucifer was provided as an anti-god. The same is exactly happened with the character of Satan, which is actually to be found in the story of Job. In that particular context, it is an office and not a being. It is an entity who is a wandering angel who comes and takes charge of the testing of the character Job, and then is tasked to torture him so as to test his faith. And that office changes through time. Later, Christians turned it into a character in their Gospels, a number of Gospels, not just the ones that they canonized and accepted as part of their Bibles. And so that being became an initiator of Jesus, tempting him as a famous temptation. But what was the third item that you had asked about?
Well, I mentioned Lucifer, then I had gone over to Satan, and then I had mentioned the devil and demon.
Ah, the devil. The devil's a very interesting word and character. Devil, or der Teufel, is also associated, besides being a Christian anti-god, a woods being or nature spirit of a kind from the Germanic regions. All of these words are combined together as part of stories to slander and to condemn. The the idea of a demon actually seems to arise within the Greek culture as an ambiguous referent, a neutral spirit, and later is turned into a dualistic idea of antagonistic spirits or entities. And it may be, and I theorize, that these entities or spirits are antagonistic toward those who are dualistic or who are anti-demonic. And so it may be the case that they return in kind the character that they're supposed, so that they are anti-Christian as demons. Therefore, people who aren't Christians may be able to befriend them or to have a positive relationship with them, whereas those who are antagonistic to them might not.
Okay, so in reference to your choice and you being a sadist, I realize, and in going back to your references of all personifications, Why not be a Luciferian? Not why be a Satanist versus that? And you know, why take that choice when you're talking about lots of lots of the same methodologies in a way, lots of the coming from the same area.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that's ambiguous about the word Lucifer and the character is that there's also an identification within that same set of scriptures of Jesus with Lucifer, and, of course, with Venus in previous times. So the character, especially being a light bringer and in a society that values light and sees it as something positive, that's not quite the same as associating with something that's demonized or that has a root that really indicates that it is an adversary, an enemy. And so it's more controversial and more striking to ally in a pact with something that is identified as an enemy rather than as something that could be positive based on its name.
I see. Okay. Well, you've chosen your path. You've made your pact. I do have a question that I ask many Satanists, and one of the things that I ask is it's pretty much it goes down as I should just stamp it. This is what I ask lots of people. First of all, selling your soul, and when you sell your soul, one would say that possibly it's not yours to own, and when you do sell it, my question to you is that how have you had verification that it's actually happened? Because to sell your soul means to own something, because you cannot sell something that's not yours, or you cannot sell something and if you did sell something, where's your receipt of approval that has actually been accepted? And then where do you go on from there? Because if you have sold something, it no longer belongs to you. Therefore, your will per se is null. It's not. So, what is your take on that?
Well, the idea of selling your soul or yourself or your body or your time or anything to do with one's own entity and
Mm-hmm.
intelligence is one that's controversial, and I do not happen to think there's any evidence or any substantiation to the reality of a soul. To me, a soul is a fiction, and
Mm-hmm.
it is something that can relate in a positive way to the entirety of one's being and one's energies. And there are many instances of people finding it valuable to ally with or to contract with entities like spirits and gods and even demons for an exchange of time, energy, or effort in and exchanging for what that spirit may provide. So I think of a selling of a soul, especially within a culture that emphasizes Faustian bargains,
Mm-hmm.
where you are ideally providing some sort of essence as something that's fake, that's fiction. It is actually a cautionary tale against relationships with other gods. And so to engage in that, or to find a way to make a deal of that kind, can be transgressive and it can be liberating, and you can establish a relationship with other gods or other entities that you might not otherwise.
So you're saying that once you sell your soul, I mean, what if you can clarify that? Once you sell your soul, you cannot resell your soul, or once you sell, I mean, how would you actually buy your soul back? I'm just curious. I mean, how would you
Well, if,
actually?
if, if a soul isn't something that is physical, if a soul is something that is your energetic portion of who you are, and you're engaging in an alliance or a uh, a labor exchange, if you like, where I work for you and you work for me. It's the same kind of a relationship that I might establish with you. I'm not selling you part of myself. I'm selling you what I am and my efforts in association with that. There's no other way that that's realistically possible. That is, souls don't exist in any other manner.
All right, so you're saying basically it's symbolic.
Yes, it is. It's symbolic, and unless you understand a soul to be the entirety of myself. And then you may engage in a business transaction whereby you are saying, I will
I
provide
understand.
that
Mm-hmm.
for the, and my pact is one that's an ongoing one. It is not a permanent and irrevocable one. It has a specific engagement that either one of us may break at any time.
Because I actually, personally, if I were to, I mean, I'm a very serious, let's just say, I interact seriously with spirits, and I, would never do anything symbolic. It's always, if you will, a life and death type of situation. So with that given, could it be that you would have teenagers, for instance, or people who just didn't know, actually selling their souls all the time and really not knowing what the heck they're talking about, or probably then one day going over to another path, and I mean, where's seriousness in the dedication of this if it's all symbolic to the point where is it it doesn't exist, and we're talking about holographic. Or let's just say a thought form process of a relationship.
Well, I wasn't only talking, I was merely talking about the symbolism being related to the essentiality, what it is that you're making a deal with. In terms of the entities or the spirits or gods, I think they're quite real. I don't think that they are just a symbol, and so having a relationship with them extends far beyond just some sort of symbolism. In terms of children or teenagers or young adults even, who may want to do these things, I don't think there's any harm in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if they want to make that kind of an arrangement, they might learn from it, and they may learn that their essentiality doesn't exist, which might be a good revelation for them.
I see. Okay. Now, with Satanism, I have seen lots of people really come into their own of really standing up for their own rights, and really learning who they are, making choices that they wouldn't ordinarily make, and not being conformed to society's ways of living and thinking. So in that essence, I would say that Satanism has been very positive for many people. But within the Satanist community, I've seen a lot of, let's just say, chaos in reference to the division of type of Satanisms, Satanistic pacts or Satan paths. How do you what is your opinion about that? Because I would say the one for all and all for one, that type of thing. I would love to say that, whereas that if you believe in something, and if it's the same thing, why not everyone just get along? But people just don't do that, and I've seen a lot of chaos within Satanism that I'm not really understanding, because if it is one Satan, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, then why the division? Unless, of course, there's a theory that I have that possibly there has been lots of disassociation with Satan itself, because I'm not declaring Satan female or male, but Satan itself, and too many people putting their own thought forms and idealisms in the essence of who they think Satan is, and not necessarily connecting with Satan. Because if you've got your theory about who Satan is, and this person has their theory, you're not going to really agree. But if there is one commonality, then there is no room for discussion.
Well, I like to think of Satan as manifesting in myriad forms and manners, so that every person has their own interaction and relationship with that, and it may appear in different ways and negotiate its relationship differently. Also, there's a heavy emphasis on individualism and egotism within the Satanist milieu, and I think that that is the main reason why we have so many different contending and non-cooperative relationships with people just doing their own thing. I don't think that it has to resolve, and in fact, it's kind of refreshing. It is an example contrary to the notion of a monolithic religion,
Mm-hmm.
and in many ways, it opposes those things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's exemplary in that regard.
Yeah, well, in reference to a monolithic, type of pathway, I'm not condoning it, or going against it. But my take on that is that when you're talking about perspectives, and you're talking about a sphere of 360, unless you're standing at a certain given pivotal point, no one's going to see anything on the same level or at the same perspective given on that range. However, if you take the sun, for instance, you can pretty much the sun is at clocking at 12 o'clock. Most people will see that perspective all at the same time, and hence being the same thing, because it is one unit of one thing, not making it any type of one entity, but it is one, which no
Yeah.
one can disagree to. So, in reference to a person, people looking at you via, YouTube, looking at you from a linear type of, positioning of, from eye to eye, we see you all, face front, and most
Mhm.
people, unless they're colorblind or their settings on their computers is off, then they're going to see the same colors. So that is my position in that, because Satan is Satan, and to personify him or her, it and different aspects gives me a I just feel a little off kilter of the perception that really Satan should be portrayed. Um,
Hmm.
it's just because otherwise, how can you truly learn Satanism? How can you truly
Well, I
learn?
think that the difference between the sun and human beings, who are animals, and any kind of spirit or god or angel or demon, what have you, is that the one is objective and the other is subjective. My understanding is that gods and spirits and these types of intelligences live interior to consciousness. They do not live outside of it. And those ascriptions of power and omniscience and many other things are all fictional. They are provided as a romantic endorsement of the gods that we may worship. So to see Satan in many different ways just makes sense, whereas
Mm-hmm.
to see me in many different ways would be more difficult. It's possible you'll see me in this turban today. Later, I'll go outside, I won't have it on. So there are ways of seeing
I see.
even objects in
Okay.
different ways as well.
Sure. Well, let's move on to parts of your book, because when I read your book, by the way, I found it to be very interesting, and also too, you've got lots of references on your website, and certain different parts. You mentioned certain areas and how to proceed, and really it if someone follows it. There should be no discussion as to what should you do, because you can always reference within the book. But you also mentioned sacrifice. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, sure. Well, the primary focus of sacrifice, and especially human sacrifice within that book, was euthanasia, a good death, some manner by which the individual might come to an end that we desire. And that is the primary emphasis that I have for the idea of sacrifice, is to make our ending as good as our life is.
I see. Now, isn't there I mean, so why would someone actually want to sacrifice? If you could elaborate on that so people can understand.
Well, there's a few ways of going about it. For one, if you're talking about the way that we consume food, we may be able to make the engagement of the animals and plants, the living beings that we engage, a sacred rite, and thereby emphasize the importance of the being whose life we are taking in order to eat them. If that is the manner by which you're referring to sacrifice, that's one reason to do it, is to really escalate the value of the being that we are eating, because we need to eat in order to live. Another way of seeing sacrifice, and that's the kind of sacrifice, by the way, that I really endorse and am really positively behind, is when there are people who know that they're going to eat, when they are humanely killing the food that they are going to eat, and they make that part of a religious ritual. I really like that very much, rather than not understanding any of the value of those beings. And in terms of euthanasia, which I think of as valuable to emphasize here, the idea that our life should be ending in a chosen manner, especially, and then in a manner which is pleasing to us, is very important to me, mostly because of the people that I've known who wanted it that way, and I think of it as a manner of self empowerment.
I see. Okay. Well, yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, because it's not about a selfish right of sacrament. It's about really passing on and giving that entity that is deceased, the proper, and let's just say the humane passing on. When you're you have mentioned that a lot of your writings have been through anger and really trying to get out some message to people, to have an acceptance and to change things. And I understand, and I really appreciate that. Um, do you feel that any of that is happening?
Well, I think that the primary anger was surrounding the writing of the gospel. And then after that, I've been much more peaceful about it. I just happened to have been in a fit of anger that I wrote that. And then, other than that, I'm motivated out of compassion. I really want to see people valuing others and not slandering them. So, promoting in the manner that I am able a better approach to diversity and uh, cultural diversity really is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. When there have been centuries of this kind of propaganda that leads to moral panics, to me, it's valuable to speak out and to participate in constructing religions that use that propaganda for positive purpose, turn it and take it away from those who are using it as a weapon and use it for something that's more like a flower.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. That's why I mentioned about the Satanists actually coming together a little bit more, because as you know, they that cliche, united we stand, divided we fall, and such as you've got many religious, the actual main religions basically sticking together. Therefore, they're more vast. They're by the drones of millions, because many stick together, and many of the Satanists are so divided to the point where is that even things that get put out in the media, you cannot dispute because they don't stick together. Everyone's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, forget it, or whatever. So it's almost like an oxymoron, or getting on a treadmill. You may be exercising and talking, but going nowhere. So
Mm-hmm.
with that, I thought that the unity might help a voice become louder than very subtle. Because your information and what you stand for, I totally agree with. There has been a lot of negative press about Satanism, and lots of negative things about, just as you mentioned before, about Islam, about the 9/11, because that instance only happened by a small sect of people. And
Yeah.
of course, we all have seen how masses will judge just based on one small group. And with that, and going forward, I'd like for you, if you could possibly give me a few things, a few fallacies that are not true with Satanism as you see it today, because Satanism has, how should I say, evolved from the Anton LaVey days.
Mm-hmm.
From the behind the scenes and getting on the altar and the Rosemary Baby type of thing, and the secrecy behind the doors and things like that. Satanism has grown to a certain degree that many people would not have thought that it would had, because the New Age era came in, and then you had people getting more into Wicca, and now you have more Satanists coming out more than ever before, than before. So with that, I'm sure many of the assumptions have actually been not spot on, off target. So can you shed light to any of that?
Sure. Well, I think that one of the values to the diversity that Satan includes comes because a lot of the religions that you were just mentioning were consolidated and put into a momentum of monolithic structure based on violence. These religions have, by the sword and by weapons and by conquering and imperialism, demonstrated that they should be feared and that people should adhere to them. Otherwise, they will be wiped out. And many who have tried to establish an alternative, such as Jews and Gnostics and others, were actually the target of this propaganda and so have been wiped out in many numbers. That aspect of the notion, which is Satanism, should be understood. The idea that just a religion is growing up out of nothing in the 1960s really should be understood in a better context of this being a revolution against imperialist and violent religions that preceded it who've constructed an artifice, something that is fake, and it gives the impression of being wholly evil and nasty, and then it's used as a target for others. So in that sense, that's the first thing that I would want to emphasize about what Satanism is. There's no real reason for it to adhere amongst a number of different people. As long as everyone's doing what they feel like they want to do, they're then taking away those weapons of propaganda that have been used. So it's all good as far as I'm concerned. Other things that are mentioned in association with Satanism of late include the connection with ancient deities. And that is part of what religions do, it seems to me, is that they make ancient backdrops to give themselves legitimacy. And as far as I'm concerned, it's fake in just the same way that religious witchcraft is not really ancient either. It wasn't a religion before it became one, and that doesn't mean that to me that it's not viable or it's not religious or anything of that sort. It just means that it's valuable for me to point it out. With respect to the types of things that Satanists do, I think that it's important to note that with the integration of controversy and fascism in combination with Satanism, that is a self-delimiting and self-disabling combination. And some people will want to do it because of its controversy and because previous to them, things that were recently very horrific, World War II, Holocaust, all of those things that came before are associated with the evil by those who are in the primary culture, and then by Satanists it's taken up to a certain extent, despite the fact that it runs directly contrary against individualism and personal choice. And that direct contradiction is not always emphasized by people who promote the Satanism.
I see. Okay. Well, obviously that a lot of everything you said is very real. Everything you've said is valid. I don't see, it's just that for some reason it's not pointed out as often. And of course, you don't have as many Satanists speaking out as often. As you know, most Satanists are very solitary, but yet they come together in groups. But then the groups break up and it goes back and forth. So there's a sort of like a evolving door that happens. What would you like to do going forward? Because you've written the Gospel of Satan. And that was out of let's just say a shout out to, okay, this is how I feel. This is what I would like to exploit. Now that you have, let's just say, gone to the garden, gone to the fire, and you feel refreshed and you feel more at peace, what would be the next large project that you would like to actually explode and really convey to the world?
Yeah, I was talking with Satan about that and wondering why it was that Satan wanted me to publish this gospel and commentary. And he suggested that the reason why he wanted to was because he appreciated the writing of my guru. And so that's the next thing that I'm going to be doing, is to facilitate the publication of more writings about magic, especially about things that are popular and folk magic oriented, because that's the greatest interest that I have and what seems to be the interest that Satan has too.
And I would like to, because as the program here, almost finishes, I would like to ask you a little bit more about Satan, because with Satan, you're talking about a huge entity. You're talking about a huge presence, within, communication. When a parent talks to a child that's 2 years old, that child knows to see this parent or this elder as huge and really powerful, and sometimes overbearing. Is there any type of feeling that you feel in reference to your association of Satan? Because Satan is, I regard, Satan or, entities of such, very huge, and there's a sense of respect, and there's a sense of putting you not so much here, but down here, and you know what I'm saying. There's not an even level, an even level of association. So your association seems rather casual. and almost to the personification of an even level. Can you elaborate on your the hierarchy and the association a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I'm an ally of Satan and Satanists. I have a dedication to my god, to the demon queen Kali Ma, and I do not have that relationship of equalness to her as I understand it. My romantic relationship with her is such that I regard her as someone worthy of obeisance and complete devotion. Satan is someone whom she has given me the suggestion to ally with
I see.
as effectively unequal, and so therefore, and even as I ally with Satanists, I notice many of them have the same kind of understanding or relationship as one of equals in which we're comrades or we are friends, and less so that we're devoted. I don't think that disqualifies those who are theistic Satanists or those who are even demonolators who worship demons from having the relationship that they want with that or those beings. And I certainly don't understand any god or Satan or demon to be grander than human beings. I think that all of them reside within consciousness inside the human species.
I see. Okay. Now you mentioned the various sects, SECT of Satanism. Which do you revere yourself as?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat
Um,
it?
as which area of Satanism do you practice? Because
Oh, I see. Yes, I have thought about and studied many different types and settled upon demonic Satanism as one to advocate. And in particular, because I did not like the revisionism of turning Satan into a god or turning Satan into a Lucifer angel or doing something that seemed to blunt or somehow whitewash the demon that Satan is. And I thought it would be valuable to understand Satan as a demon and relate to Satan as a demon, and that this is an entire attitude that one can take on. And I like that.
Okay, so Satan as a demon and in your relationship with Satan, are you also too interacting with other demons, other demonic entities that Satan actually, I mean, it's hard for me to really interpret what I'm trying to say here, but in reference to your relationship with Satan as a demon, as a demonic entity, are you also too intertwined with the other demonic entities in, with your communication?
I understand. I have no other communication or personal relationship with any other demons at this time. I have occasionally taken it upon myself to invoke various others, such as Lilith and some other kinds of demons. And I am also, because in part of my friendships with human beings, drawn to possibly have a connection with Pazuzu,
Mm-hmm.
in part because of the popular notions that are associated with that, and because of statues arising that are part of the culture in which I'm engaging people. I have a little statue of Pazuzu here right now, and so those are a couple of examples, but no personal engagement of any of those beings really. No.
I see. And so you rather invoke rather than evoke.
Yes, I consider it to be a little bit more friendly, and also I don't see them as adverse to me, so that they were always, I have always had the sense that it was acceptable and that it was a friendly way of going about having an engagement with them. Also, since I see these entities as subjective, it just seems to me a lot easier to have an interior experience of them than one that would require me being able to see them exteriorly. I can do that. I have had that experience with my God and with other entities, but it's more difficult to have that relationship or that experience to see them outside myself. I don't believe that they manifest.
I see. So is your life purpose to actually carry out Satan's doings, or is your life purpose basically to carry out what you see fit?
I would say that my entirety is focused upon dedication and devotion to Kali, and in part, she has requested that I make an alliance with Satan because he's been sorely put upon. That is, he's an unfair target of sociopolitical energy and unfair criticism. And so my aim in that context of acting out of compassion is to reflect accurately what seems to be going on, whether that's pointing out that there are FBI reports from Kenneth Lanning or others who make it plain what Satanism really is, or whether that's bringing to some friends who tell me about their horror tales the notion that these aren't real or that they are symbols more so than the reality that they are expecting.
I see. Well, I have to say that I can personally say that I know that Satan has a lot of help. So it's it's not something that is unachievable. But with that, and in your relationship with Pazuzu and all the other entities, wouldn't Satan be enough?
I don't know what's enough. It seems to me that that is the center point of focused
Okay.
animosity in the culture I'm living. Yes.
I see. And you going forward, I guess in the near future and forthcoming year, bringing out more magic. And why the magic? Why not the invocation of the entity and work through the entity? What would you call the difference between working and doing the magic? Would that be basically calling upon the entity to work on your behalf, or would that be to call upon the entity to give you the knowledge to become quote unquote your own god to do as you will? I mean, so what is the purpose of the magic itself then?
It's empowerment and the ability to use tools. My aim would be to respond to Satan's and my guru's request that a specific document of tools is available, primarily seals and talismans and things that people can use to do and get what they want. And so my response to them is out of my interest in having a continuing relationship with them, and that purpose really is to facilitate people being empowered.
I see. Just probably two more last questions I have to ask. I've spoken to quite a few many people who are really who have a very close relationship with the entities that they work with and the demons that they actually evoke or invoke, and you have come to a point, not you personally, but we have come to a point in our, let's say, our cult era, whereas that we are basically with the internet, we are really engrossing ourselves with lots of information, lots of empowerment. And then when you even say, and you use the word empowerment and you use the demonic entities that you can actually bring and help or help other people, um, give us about maybe 20 years, 2 decades or so. How do you think the world is going to be with everyone empowered and everyone basically zapping everyone and having everyone's will? Are we going to live in a world of chaos, you feel? I mean, what is your take on that? Because you've mentioned, let's say, at one point you've mentioned anger, and then you've mentioned to the point of progression to of peace. But then to give out such empowerment to people who may be ignorant or people who may not come to that plateau of enlightenment of knowledge, they may misuse the information. They may just do it for the hell of it. So what is your take on giving so much information out for people playing with matches and possibly getting burned?
Well, I don't see the repercussions or the dangers are so great as they are supposed. So that the ideas that you're talking about with respect to exercise of magic, I don't notice that the reality is such that there's that much danger involved. And most of the empowerment I'm talking about is personal. That is, it is involved with their own perception and their own self-concept, their own image, and their own personal carriage, their own psychology, such that my interest is making it possible for them to develop as human beings. And the magic that they want to do, I prefer that to using weapons of mass
Of course.
destruction, weapons of other types that are physical, because I think of that as an acceptable level of engagement of contention, that is the symbolic and magical realm, as compared to that relating to weapons. And I'm actually a pacifist, and I oppose the use of weapons. So to me, I divide up the physical or material weaponry and that which might be used within magic as something that is negotiated. And I won't necessarily speculate at this point as to how it's negotiated, but I would like to make people accept that as an alternative to their weapon use.
I totally agree with that. But with that also too, you know that there are powers within other realms that could possibly be just as dangerous. Um, I mean, you're talking about demonic entities and strengths that can be used against other people as well. So if it's not one, it's the other, that could possibly be used against the let's just say the path of a path that's, such as yourself, because not everyone has the or not everyone is quote unquote pure in heart or wants peace. Some people give a damn about peace and just basically want to have empowerment and full of I'm this big person and you're down there. So I guess there just needs to be a balance. What's next for you besides your new book that you'll be writing on Magick?
Yeah, it's mostly not a book I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
It is a book of a book that can be used to take the seals and talismans of ancient grimoires
Mm-hmm.
and then employ them for folk magical use. That's the primary focus that I have, other than making a number of books available that are on folk magic and things of that kind, spiritualism, and also things like New Thought, kinds of things that are part of the magical paradigm and ones that Satan and my guru seem to be emphasizing.
I see. Um, when you talk about your life and you talk about going forward, do you feel that you have progressed quite a bit over the 6 years? I know I asked you that prior, but through our conversation, it seems like you actually have. It seems like you've come from where you were in the beginning, and then just a year ago you've made this revelation and received the information from Satan. It looks like you're actually going to be making a whole lot more, let's say, progressive pacts and receiving information, going in the near future. Do you see that for yourself? I mean, because it looks like you've actually progressed quite a bit in reference to the very beginning that you've started. Do you see yourself going in any other areas of the occult, any other areas of possibly even Satanism?
I'm not sure. I do think that the peripheries like Luciferianism and things that are more recently developing, theistic Satanism, demonology, such as out of the Connolly books and other things of that kind, are sufficiently interesting to me that I want to study them and get to know the people who are making them. And also, I try to keep abreast of all of the developments that are involved with the subculture that is Satanism and witchcraft and neo-paganism. My interests otherwise are personal, and they have often to do with philosophy and with things that are Asian, whether that's Taoism or Buddhism, things of that kind, the application of those kinds of philosophies to a resolved and compassionate life are something that I will continue to do no matter what it is I'm engaged in.
I see. Okay. Well, I think that you've actually put a very positive stamp on Satanism, uh, mainly because I have to say that in the very beginning, many people revered, Satanism as a very negative path,
Mhm.
and a path whereby most people were basically labeled as evil and people who disregarded everyone else's will. And it was up to no good of any humanity. When in fact, I have to say honestly, it looks like the governments they've actually taken that label and just ran with it big time. So I would say Satanism shouldn't be feared in that aspect whatsoever. So I have to say that honestly, you've done a fantastic job. But I want to thank you for agreeing to be on the show. And really, I've enjoyed your book. You've put quite a bit of information on your website as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which website, because I know that you've got a few websites, which website would you prefer people to actually go to when they want to seek the information that you actually have?
I think the best one to focus on at this time is gospelofsatan.com, because that's an entree into the scripture and then into where the book may be obtained and how they can find out about the essays or fatwas that are associated with it. It also will be enable them to connect with me through that website. There are a few others that I administrate, but that's the best one to start with.
Do you ever teach, or are you taking students, or are you giving consultations?
I am not at this time. What I do is I engage in social networking primarily through Facebook and occasionally through other means, and I have interviews with people on those networks and engage them. Many of them are children, or many of them are young adults who come to me asking if they can sell their souls. And so I'm informing them what I understand about that and then helping them to get what they want if I can. The difficulty is that their notion about the universe is strongly adverse to my own. And often they are Christians, and so I have to give them a perspective from their own paradigm as to what they would need to be doing if they want to actually succeed. That is, if they want to sell their soul, they have to make their soul worthy of being sold, which means that they have to become a good Christian or become a good Muslim. So I send them back to their own teachers,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah, right. That's yeah, exactly. I agree with that. All
Yeah,
right, then. It's been a pleasure having you on. I wish you all the best, and
thank you.
really, I think that you're doing a wonderful job. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste.